Hello, I'm Jeremy Valentine.
And I'm Dexter Darwood.
And they are the Cortinas. The wonderful Cortinas were Bristol's first punk group. They formed while they were still growing at the age of 15. Ace.
One very clear day, I remember Jeremy coming to the playground with a copy of Patti Smith album under his arm. I had never seen it, had no idea what it was. We were very, very young, do you know what I mean? And it was like a hobby which turned into we left halfway through doing A-level and stuff to take it on full time.
Inspired by Patti Smith and Dr. Feelgood, they learnt 3 chords and formed a band. A series of suitably energetic and angry gigs followed, and they signed a record deal. The Cortinas were it. They were invited to London to play on the hallowed and legendary stage of legendary and hallowed punk venue, the Roxy. Gareth Sager, later of the Pop Group.
We used to come up with them. I can't even imagine how we did it now, but there was about 10 of us in like the drummer's dad's caravan. I mean, it's a pathetic story, but it's true. And Mark's 6'5" even then, so, and the equipment. I mean, I kid you not.
Punk in Bristol was over almost as soon as it began. The next step, logically enough, was post-punk. The Cortinas.
I think it's fair to say that the pop group blew everything out of the water, actually. I mean, it has to be said. They supported us at the Marquee in Wardour Street. And like when we came on, everyone just went home, really. I mean, it was like, what? Incredibly imaginative, doing something very different, very new, very creative.
The mastermind, Svengali, catalyst, enabler, and one with the best hat in the pop group was Mark Stewart. Tim Williams remembers the beginnings of this enormously important Bristol band.
He was his own man, and when I first knew him, he was probably about 16 or 17, completely out on his own, knew what he wanted to do. His influences were bizarre and mixed. What they produced was like nothing I'd heard before. At their first gig, the sound was fully formed. Funk was there, reggae was there, jazz was there. It was very emotive, very emotional stuff. And Mark was a beguiling figure on stage. I mean, he's about 6'5" tall, and everybody else in the band was short and still growing, and it looked like a dad out on stage with a bunch of his kids.
funk that Mark had been hearing at the Guildhall was a massive influence on him. Unfortunately, the pop group were no Ohio players.
Basically, none of us could play, and I was trying to get them to play these like Fatback Band bass lines, and we couldn't play. And in Bristol, we immediately became quite famous. And these older kind of rock journalists, like Richard Williams from The Melody Maker, Neil Spencer from the editor of The NME, they were coming to see us and getting very excited because obviously all our mates were jumping up and down. And we thought we were funky, but they thought we were doing some kind of abstract free jazz Captain Beefheart out of time, threatening the signatures, right? But we couldn't play. You know, we thought we were being funky.
In the wake of the pop group, Bristol spawned a whole goatee gallery of art punk bands. Big props then to the art objects, shoes for industry and the numbers. How often do you hear that on Radio 2? But it was Glaxo babies who were at the forefront of the new experimenting. Here's a track called This Is Your Life.
This is your life. This is your life. Crying in the subway, lying to your wife. This is your life. Cold on the outside, empty inside. Talk to yourself on the escalator. This is your life. Make a list of things to do and do them. This is your life, such a boring story, this is your life.
My name's Mike Darby, I'm director at Bristol Archive Records. It sounds like it cost a fortune to make. In fact, it sounds like it could be released tomorrow. It's so fresh in terms of its sound. They were probably the first people to use samples, and they probably didn't know what they were doing in terms of nicking samples from others or news programs and cutting them into their music.
Dan Katzis, vocals and guitars.
Obviously we didn't have samplers in those days, we were just taking bits of stuff and using tape loops, you know, or whatever. I don't think we were the only people that were doing it. I mean, the pop group, we did that with the pop group as well. God, if we'd had samplers, you know, but we didn't. I mean, it was a normal thing to us. When sampling came along, it was like, oh, well, that's obvious. We've been trying to do that for years.
This is your life. This is your life. Crying in the subway, lying to your wife. This is your life. Cold on the surface, hollow inside. Reread your copy of Death of a Salesman. Must remember the wife, must remember the wife.
I remember seeing them play at the Anson Rooms in 78, 79 with Dan Katzis using a vibrator to play guitar.
I think we were a great band, actually, and I think if only we had a sense of the future and weren't so idealistic, because we were incredibly idealistic, and we didn't have a management as such. So we never really played anywhere. We never played north of London. And then years later you find there was a little fan base up in Scotland and in Manchester and Liverpool, and I played those places with the pop group, but never with the Glaxo Babies. It's a completely different period there, sort of mentally and psychologically. I mean, we didn't think about careers like people do now. We just didn't come into it. I mean, even when I went to art school, I didn't think about a career as an artist. You know, it was just something you did because you were passionate about it. And so with hindsight, you said, God, if only we had somebody sat us down and said, well, what do you want to be doing in 5 years' time? Would you like to be making money and making a living as a musician? Maybe we would have said yes. We didn't have a 6-month plan, let alone a 10-year plan.
Time to ask, just what is it that made Bristol such a potent artistic musical force? Chris Brown.
real fundamental difference between a city like London and Bristol is, of course, London's huge. It sounds obvious, and Birmingham's huge. So they'll have their own sounds maybe out in their own districts, whereas Bristol, everybody tended to congregate in the city centre. It was just that not big enough city that any of the suburbs had their own sounds. It just didn't happen. What we haven't got here is big arenas. Because of that, maybe people have done everything a bit more low-key, and so because it has been a more low-key affair, they've looked at doing a little club scene which has evolved in that respect. I do love the buzz of Bristol. It definitely has got that big village atmosphere at times about it. I can't remember sort of flyers being around or posters or anything. It was just word of mouth, and it was the same with the records.
Everybody used to work together. They used to listen to the music, bring stuff down to you. What is it about Bristol? Everybody was interested.
Mike Darby has another theory.
It didn't really matter who you were or what you are. If you were in a band, everyone kind of got on. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about status, it wasn't about whether you were black or white. Bristol was very multicultural at the time. Because of the university. I mean, all these people in here are intelligent, the lyrical content's excellent, the musicianship's excellent.
And there wasn't a road cone to be found for 25 miles. Bloody students. So, already we're seeing the beginnings of a scene so vibrant it makes Manchester look like a bit of old brown paper. And we haven't even mentioned reggae or hip-hop yet.
Didn't know it then, but then how could I? How was I supposed to recognize? Time of my life. Time of my life.
Mark Stewart.
The pop group went global within months of forming, really. I think it's a kind of global mindset which is questioning everything you're told. And the kind of catalyst of that town was the fact that you can kind of get up and say what you believe in without tugging a forelock to any kind of massive multinationals. It's that kind of arrogance. It changed a generation, and it's changing generation after generation after generation. It's arrogance. It's not the arrogance of power, it's the power of arrogance.
Join me for a fat slice of dub, a sharp dash of post-punk, and a large helping of greasy rap sauce in part 2 of Way Out West. Way Out West was produced by Simon Poole at Unique Production Company. The researcher was Anna Wainwright.